Now what I ask you to do here is two things. Number one, take this sheet and copy it to your Google Drive so that you're working on your copy, so that you're not making changes to our copy, please. You can make additions to our copy, and so it's kind of dangerous here. Make sure you're only editing your copy. Maybe give it a name, like your name on the title. Instead of Lab 7, say my copy of Lab 7 or something, so that you know what you're looking at. In addition, under File and Save, Download, there it is. Export this as a CSV file so that you can read it into ARC. You're going to take this file and read it into ARC Pro. Remember, do that using Catalog View. It'll save you heartache. So go to Catalog View. When you first open up ARC, go to Catalog View, find your file, find this file, and read it in exactly like we did in the first part of Lab 7. Then take that file and, just like we did in the very first part of Lab 7 in Catalog View, project that file into state plane for Maryland using NAD83 US feet. All right, so we're done with this document. I want to point out a couple things that you can do with this file once you read it in to ARC. So you'll notice here I have a base map, and those points that I have taking as read that you have extracted and put into turned into a shapefile on your own, and that shapefile is in state plane. Why is that important, state plane? We need a linear unit so we can measure distances and things like that. If this is just in WGS84, which is what your coordinates are in when you mark locations with the GPS by default, then it's more difficult to measure things like area, to calculate things that you might want to calculate. So putting things into a projected coordinate system is something you can do, and an important thing to do, so that you can do precisely that. Now here our source file contains the spatial reference, so I can see here that this is NAD83 state plane, so good. Notice that that state plane projection for Maryland is actually based on Lambert conformal conic, which is what we've been using all semester, is centered in Maryland. And so it has two standard parallels, if you remember what that means. Now these different notations hopefully make more sense than they once did, is my point. And what we're going to lean on in ARC is stuff that you already know. You've done the hard part. You've constructed that table so we could get these common measures. And in ARC, what we're going to do is just start slicing and dicing our data. We're going to play around with these things analytically. We've got our measurements. Let's see what stories we can tell with them. Now, the reason I asked you all those questions about your study area, like street and walkable and transit, was just to create some different really simple variables to allow you to analyze these data on your own. So for example, there's this field called people, and that is, I guess, probably dangerously subjective. It's asking, basically, are there people on the street? I think I said on the street. I meant like on sidewalks and stuff. I didn't mean literally walking down the street, so I don't know how you interpreted that. Sorry if it was ambiguous, but what I was trying to get at is, are there people around that aren't just in cars? Like, some neighborhoods you see people walking by the shops and stuff. Is that the case? And so this is a binary, often called a dichotomous. It's either a 0 or a 1, and the way we interpret that is 0 means nope, people are just in their cars or not there or inside, and 1 means yeah, there are people around. Now to divide this up, if I sort this field ascending, I can rearrange the data so that I have all the people sorted low to high, which means it's broken into 0s and 1s. Now notice when I do that in ARC, importantly, it's not like this in Excel or in Google Sheets necessarily. When I sort one field in a data table in ARC, it sorts all the fields so that things don't get jumbled up. In Excel, that's not necessarily true. So I've sorted that. Now I see that there's several locations where there weren't that many people around. And then there's some locations where there were quite a few. Now notice in this walkthrough, I only have 17 points because I'm waiting for your data. And some of them weren't cleaned properly, so I omitted a few. So this is a walkthrough with a limited set of observations. Now what I can do is take this variable, people, that is breaking up your observations. Let me say one more thing about the points that we're looking at. Several of you are looking at points that are outside this area I'm zoomed into. I'm zooming into this so we can see a bit better what's going on. You can make choices about how to symbolize this yourself, but I could also zoom out here to show the extent of all of our points, because a couple of you are not in Maryland. And so we've got a fairly large study area overall. How you represent that ultimately in your map is totally up to you. In this case, I'm zooming in just so that you can see a bit better what's going on whatever screen you're looking at. Now, here, what I'd be tempted to do first is say, okay, I've got two different kinds of points. I've got points where there are people, and I've got points where there are no people. So instead of a single symbol, I can go to unique values and use people. There are two unique values there, and so I can re-symbolize these and maybe make them a little bit bigger. Maybe make them a little bit easier to see. So, I don't know, green. I like green. And so those are the places where there are no people, and then we have places where there are people. Now again, keep in mind some of your points are not present on this map. Let's do purple. All right, so there we go. Right, let's make this a little bit bigger. Two kinds of people, or two kinds of locations. Now those are still blue on the map because they're still selected in my data table, which means they're still selected on the map. I can clear those here. Now I've got this map that shows here are two kinds of locations. Now what I'm asking you to do ultimately is then compare that to some variable. So what do you think people might be related to? Well, it could have to do with walkability, I suppose. You could see if those two places overlap. But it might be interesting to work with some of our measures. So is the presence of people maybe determined by one of these other columns? Well, I can take a look at both of those things. I can make a copy of this one, of the study areas, and then paste it into the map. And change the symbology on this one. So instead of looking at people, I could look at % retail. And instead of unique values, draw this as graduated colors. Where did it go? There we are. Now notice when I do this, it's no longer % retail that I'm looking at. Now at first this confused me. You may have noticed the bad edit. But here it's jumped back to latitude. Why would that be? And then it took me a minute to realize it, but I looked at % retail and I realized, oh, look how it's aligned on the left-hand side. And when I let my mouse hover, it's text. So somehow, don't know why, ARC wanted to be cruel to me. When I read this number, something that's clearly a number, it got read as text. Oh, I know why. Because of these % signs. Look, some of these aren't formatted. And so that % sign is being read as not a number, but a character. And so it's turned that entire column into text. So that's one reason to have your formatting the same as all these others. Percents should be a number between 0 and 1. No need for a % sign. So 0.6666 here is 67%. In any case, I need to fix that. Just remember to do that. You can say add a new field. I'll call it new % retail. I don't particularly care that ARC doesn't like that name, and I'm going to make it a double. And then I'll save my changes. Yeah. Oh, ARC won't let me do it. So, all right, % retail 2. Just help me remember that's what it is. Save all changes. Yes. And now I'm going to do in the business areas table, I'll see that new field. I'm just going to make sure it is the same using the field calculator as the original field, which was percent retail. All right, you know that part. You may have to do it yourself. And of course, it didn't change that one that was being read as a percent. So let's see. This one, I'm going to just edit manually. It's 13.133. 13.3% looks like. And were there any other errors? Any other zeros? Glaring errors. This one. All right, let's call that good enough. So I have these two fields. I want to use percent retail, my new percent retail field, to map and just assess, does it look like there's some sort of pattern that I might observe between where those points are and their values for these two variables. So here's percent retail. And what I would do if I said, oh wow, yeah, this one looks promising, is put these side by side. Just take a screenshot of one, take a screenshot of the other, put them next to each other as a graphic saying, here's the relationship. We're going to talk about how we can assess that relationship in other ways too, statistically, kind of like we did in Lab 4 in this video or in the next iteration of it. So here basically what I'd say is, where are the people? Let's take a look. They're kind of concentrated. The places with no people are concentrated, southwest of Baltimore, near our campus. That's too bad. And so they're kind of clustered there, aren't they? And the other ones are kind of far-flung all over the place. Is there some sort of correlation between where people are and percent retail on this map? Kind of hard to say. It doesn't really look like there's much of a relationship. The other thing that is probably worth doing is for both of these variables, and I indicate this in the lab document as well, is take a look at the statistics function here. And so now I'm looking at my map, and I'm also looking not just at the spatial distribution, like where those points are and what their values are, but where the values fall in a histogram. So I see that they're kind of scattered all over the place, maybe skewed to the right. We might call it slightly normal-ish. I don't know if we had a lot more observations. Of course, when you're working with these data, you will, so you may see a different pattern. Sample size matters. And here what I'm seeing is that the average is 0.31. If I click on these, notice they show up in the graphic. And you can just take this graphic and either export it as an image, as a graphic, so it's like a PNG file or a GIF, or I use Snip and just take a screenshot of it and dropped it in. And these measures of central tendency and variability show up with that variable. And that might help you think about what you're seeing and whether or not, say, the low end of that distribution might be sort of spatially coincident with what you're seeing going on in here. Anyway, I'd say in this case, the relationship is less clear, but if you play around with these for a while, you'll probably find some patterns that are interesting to you, particularly with respect to your own location. So for example, I was looking at that one, if I were looking at, let's find one, row 7, its percent retail is about 17%. It's over here. Now, if I were to look at row 7 and think about it in particular, where does it range in the overall distribution? So my percent retail is relatively low, certainly compared to these two measures of central tendency, so below average, below median. 16 is the average is 31 and the standard deviation is about 20. So I'm within one standard deviation of the mean, so not crazy far away, but so pretty close. And you can see that represented here. The mean is 31 in this orange range. My location is one shade of orange above.